The reluctant +1 Penelope Lawson tapped her boarding pass against her palm, eyeing the departure gate with growing dread. The flight to Santorini would board in 20 minutes, and her stomach twisted into complicated knots that no amount of airport coffee could settle. "This is insane," she muttered, adjusting her glasses. "Absolutely insane." 3 days ago, she'd been contentedly shelving books at the Boston Public Library, her biggest concern being whether to reorganize the poetry section by theme rather than author. Now she was about to fly across the world to be the +1 for a man she'd never met at her cousin Violet's extravagant destination wedding. Her phone buzzed with a text from Violet. "He's wearing a navy blazer with a green pocket square. Can't miss him. You're a lifesaver, Penny." Owen was devastated when his date bailed last minute. "The seating charts are already printed." Penny sighed. Family obligation was a powerful force. When Violet had called in tears about her perfect wedding being ruined by asymmetrical table arrangements, Penny had somehow agreed to this madness. "Excuse me, are you Penelope?" She looked up to find a tall man with warm brown eyes and a hesitant smile, wearing exactly what Violet had described. His dark hair had a slight wave, and he shifted his weight from one foot to another as if equally uncomfortable with the situation. "I'm Owen Martinez," he said, extending his hand. "I believe we're going to be wedding companions." "Penny," she replied, shaking his hand briefly. "Though I imagine this isn't how you plan to attend your friend's wedding." "Not exactly," Owen admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. "But Thomas and I have been friends since college. When my ex-girlfriend now backed out, Violet went into crisis mode. And somehow I was the solution," Penny said, attempting a smile. "Fair warning, I'm terrible at small talk, I don't dance, and I brought 3 books for a 4-day trip." Owen's expression relaxed. "Thank goodness, I was worried you'd be one of Violet's socialite friends. I'm just an environmental engineer who'd rather talk about sustainable water systems than whatever vintage of champagne they're serving." For the first time since this plan was hatched, Penny felt her anxiety ease slightly. At least Owen seemed as out of place in Violet's glamorous world as she felt. They boarded the plane together, an awkward pair of strangers bound for a celebration of love. Penny tucked herself against the window seat, opening her worn copy of a historical novel while Owen settled beside her. "So, what's your real connection to this wedding circus?" Owen asked as the plane began to taxi. "Violet's my cousin. We grew up together, though we couldn't be more different. She's the beautiful, confident wedding planner who organized her own perfect ceremony. I'm the quiet librarian who spends Friday nights cataloging rare editions." "That doesn't sound so bad," Owen commented. "More interesting than my Friday nights debugging water quality monitoring systems." The flight attendant began the safety demonstration, and Penny found herself studying Owen's profile. He wasn't what she'd expected. There was an earnestness to him that felt refreshingly authentic amid her cousin's world of appearances. As the plane lifted into the clouds, Penny couldn't help wondering what awaited her in Greece. She'd packed her most presentable sundresses and a single pair of uncomfortable heels. But nothing in her carefully organized life had prepared her for being thrown into a week-long celebration with strangers. What she didn't know was that among those strangers would be Jasper Calloway, who had just boarded his connecting flight from Barcelona, tucking away architectural sketches of his latest project. The bride's older brother was returning to family obligations with his own reluctance, unaware that the quiet woman his sister had arranged as a last-minute +1 would soon turn his carefully designed world upside down. The Mediterranean sun was waiting, ready to illuminate unexpected connections in its golden light. Part 2. Whispers across the reception. The Santorini sunset painted the whitewashed buildings in hues of amber and rose as Penny adjusted the delicate strap of her sage-green bridesmaid dress. She stood at the edge of the cliffside venue, momentarily escaping the swirl of laughter and music that filled the reception area. Below, the Aegean Sea glittered like scattered diamonds, a view so breathtaking it seemed almost unreal after her life among Boston's brick and concrete. "It never gets old," a voice said behind her. "No matter how many times I see it." Penny turned to find a tall man with windswept chestnut hair and eyes that mirrored the deep blue of the sea below. His tailored suit suggested money and taste, but there was something genuine in his smile that made her instinctively relax. "I've never seen anything like it," she admitted. "It makes Boston Harbor look rather ordinary." "Boston?" His eyebrows lifted with interest. "That's unexpected. I thought all of Violet's friends were from her Los Angeles circle." "I'm the family outlier," Penny explained. "Violet's cousin, and you are—" "The family disappointment," said with a wry smile. "Jasper Calloway, Violet's brother who chose Barcelona over the family real estate empire in California." Recognition dawned on Penny. Violet had mentioned her architect brother who had to be difficult by establishing his own firm in Europe instead of joining Calloway Developments, the one who builds artsy buildings instead of practical investments. Penny quoted Violet's mother with air quotes. Jasper winced. "Aunt Eleanor hasn't softened her opinions, I see." "If it helps," she described my library career as throwing away an economics degree. The laughter they shared felt surprisingly easy, as if they were old friends reuniting rather than strangers meeting at a wedding. "So you're hiding from the festivities too?" Jasper asked, leaning against the stone balustrade. "Just taking a moment. It's overwhelming. Everyone knows each other, and I'm just the outsider looking in." Jasper completed her thought. "I understand completely." Inside, the wedding planner was gesturing frantically, lining up the bridal party for introductions. Penny reluctantly pushed away from the railing. "Duty calls," she sighed. "I need to go pretend I'm comfortable in heels and sequins." "For what it's worth," Jasper said, his eyes warm with something that made Penny's heart flutter unexpectedly. "You wear them remarkably well for someone who'd clearly rather be in a library." Throughout dinner, Penny found herself seated at the family table, with Owen beside her and Jasper directly across. The conversation flowed around her: business connections, vacation properties, mutual friends and exclusive circles. While she nodded politely, feeling increasingly out of place. Under the table, she slipped off her pinching shoes, providing momentary relief. When she glanced up, she caught Jasper watching her with amusement. Instead of embarrassment, she felt a conspiratorial connection. "So, Penelope," Violet's father boomed from the head of the table, "Owen tells us you work with books. Any bestsellers we should invest in?" Before she could formulate a sufficiently impressive response, Jasper interjected. "Penny was just telling me about her work preserving historical texts," he said smoothly. "Fascinating stuff about cultural heritage that makes our family's 50-year-old company seem rather young in comparison." She hadn't told him anything of the sort, but gratitude washed over her as the conversation shifted to safer territory. Later, as the dancing began, Owen was pulled away by groomsmen for shots of local spirits. Penny retreated to a quiet corner, observing rather than participating in the celebration. "Not a dancer?" Jasper appeared beside her, offering a glass of wine. "Not unless you count swaying awkwardly while turning pages," she replied, accepting the drink. "You're not joining the festivities either?" "I've been summoned for the obligatory family photos and ceremonial dances. Otherwise, I prefer observing too." He studied her for a moment. "You know, most people here are performing, showing the version of themselves they think belongs at a luxury wedding. But you're refreshingly authentic." Penny felt her cheeks warm. "That's a polite way of saying I stick out like a dictionary at a fashion show." "I meant it as a compliment," Jasper said softly. "Do you know how rare it is to meet someone who isn't calculating their every word for advantage?" The music shifted to a slow ballad, and around them, couples moved to the dance floor. "Your family keeps looking over here," Penny observed. "I think they expect you to be mingling with the guests from suitable backgrounds." "Probably," Jasper agreed with a sigh. "There's an heiress from Vienna they're particularly keen on introducing me to." "Then why are you hiding in the corner with the librarian?" Jasper's expression grew serious. "Because earlier today, I watched that librarian help an elderly server who dropped a tray when everyone else pretended not to notice. I watched her crouch down in her fancy dress to help a lost child find her parents. I saw her genuinely tear up during the vows while everyone else was checking their makeup or scrolling through phones. Penny looked away, uncomfortable with his observation. You were watching me. I was, Jasper admitted unapologetically. In my profession, I'm trained to notice details others miss. You're the most interesting person at this entire wedding, Penelope Lawson. The way he said her name made something shift inside her, a recognition that for the first time in years, someone was truly seeing her dot across the reception. Owen caught her eye and waved, clearly tipsy, but enjoying himself with the other guests. Violet twirled in her designer gown, the center of attention, and here, in this quiet corner, Penny felt the first tremors of something unexpected taking root. Would you like to escape for a while? Jasper asked suddenly. There's a little village, away from the tourist areas. We could grab coffee, see the real Santorini. Penny hesitated, years of caution warring with an unfamiliar impulse to take a chance. The reception will go on for hours, Jasper added. No one will miss us. In that moment, with the Mediterranean breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and the promise of adventure, Penny made a decision that would change everything. Yes, she said simply. I'd like that. Moonlight promises. The narrow cobblestone streets of Phoenicia village wound like ribbons through clusters of traditional cave houses, their blue doors vibrant against whitewashed walls. Far from the manicured perfection of the wedding venue, this hidden corner of Santorini pulsed with authentic island life. Jasper walked beside Penny, their footsteps falling into an easy rhythm as they wandered further from the reception. How did you know about this place? Penny asked, admiring the bougainvillea, cascading over stone archways. I spent a month here 3 years ago, Jasper explained, designing a renovation project for one of the historical buildings. The tourist areas never felt like the real Santorini to me. This does. A small cafe tucked between 2 houses caught their attention, just a few wooden tables set on an uneven terrace illuminated by strings of warm lights. An elderly man with a weathered face gestured welcomingly. Kalispera. Come sit, he called in accented English. Beautiful night for walking. As they settled at a corner table overlooking the darkening sea, Penny felt miles away from her structured Boston life. She'd left word with Owen that she was exploring with the bride's brother, and now here she was in a foreign country with a man she barely knew, feeling more at ease than she had in years. You look different when you're relaxed, Jasper observed, watching her over the rim of his coffee cup. Like you've set down a heavy book you've been carrying. Penny laughed softly. Is that an architect's observation? More of a human one. His voice grew thoughtful. We all carry something, don't we? Some weight that shapes how we move through the world. The old cafe owner brought them small plates of local delicacies, honey-drizzled yogurt, olives, and rustic bread. As they tasted each offering, their conversation deepened beyond the superficial exchange of wedding pleasantries. So what's your weight, Penny? Jasper asked. What shaped the woman who hides her brilliance behind quiet smiles? The directness of his question caught her off guard. In Boston, people made small talk about weather and traffic. They didn't ask about the architecture of your soul on first meetings. Expectations, I suppose, she finally answered. My father was a professor. My mother runs the English department at Wellesley. I was reading Austen by 8, discussing literary theory by 12. She traced the rim of her coffee cup. When everyone expects brilliance, being ordinary feels like failure. And is that why you chose the library? A place where you could be surrounded by greatness without having to produce it yourself? Penny stared at him, startled by his perception. That's uncomfortably accurate. I recognize the pattern, Jasper said with a rueful smile. The Calloway family has built half of Southern California. My grandfather's name is on university buildings. Following family tradition would have been the easy path. But you chose Barcelona instead. I chose to build something that was mine, he corrected. Buildings that reflect how I see the world, not how my family does. A comfortable silence settled between them as the moon rose higher, casting silver light across the Aegean. In the distance, Fireworks from another resort wedding burst like colorful stars against the night sky. "We should probably head back soon," Penny said reluctantly. "Probably," Jasper agreed, making no move to leave. Instead, he leaned forward. "Can I show you one more place first?" 20 minutes later, they stood on a secluded overlook, a small stone bench the only indication that others occasionally found this hidden spot. Below them, the caldera stretched in its horseshoe embrace of the sea, village lights twinkling like earthbound constellations. "This is where I came when I needed to think," Jasper said quietly. "When I was designing the restoration project but feeling lost about my own path." "Did you find answers?" "Not answers," he replied, "just the courage to keep asking questions." Penny shivered slightly as the night breeze picked up. Without hesitation, Jasper removed his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, the lingering warmth of his body enveloping her. "Tell me something." "You've never told anyone," he said. Suddenly, Penny raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a request from someone I met hours ago." "That's precisely why it works," Jasper countered. "Sometimes strangers are safer than friends. No history, no expectations." The moonlight silvered his features, creating shadows that softened his jawline. Penny felt a strange certainty that this moment, this night, existed somehow outside of normal time. "I write poetry," she admitted softly. "Not for publication or recognition, just for myself. Words no one else has ever read." "What do you write about?" "The spaces between things, the silences, the moments people miss when they're busy looking for the spectacular." She smiled self-consciously. "I told you it wasn't particularly interesting." "On the contrary," Jasper said, his voice low. "I think it's perfectly you." "Your turn," Penny prompted. "Fair exchange." Jasper gazed out at the horizon, gathering his thoughts. "My latest project in Barcelona, the one that's getting international attention, was inspired by a dream I had about my mother." His expression grew vulnerable in a way it hadn't been before. "She died when I was 14. Cancer. The building's central atrium is designed around the way light filtered through her hospital room window the last morning we spent together. No one knows that but you." The weight of his confession hung between them. Impulsively, Penny reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining with startling rightness. "Thank you for sharing that with me," she said quietly. "Thank you for being someone I wanted to tell." The moment stretched between them, fragile and potent with possibility. Jasper's gaze dropped to her lips, and Penny found herself leaning slightly forward, drawn by an invisible current. A buzzing phone shattered the moment. Violet's name flashed on Jasper's screen with multiple messages demanding to know where he'd disappeared to. The family was taking extended family portraits in 15 minutes. Reality rushed back. Tomorrow, the wedding festivities would continue. In 3 days, Penny would board a plane back to Boston, to her books and her quiet life. Jasper would return to Barcelona, to his award-winning designs and cosmopolitan existence. "We should get back," Jasper said, regret evident in his voice. As they turned to navigate the path back to the main road, Penny slipped her hand back into his. It was a small gesture, perhaps meaningless in the grand scheme of lives built on separate continents. But as Jasper's fingers tightened around hers, both felt the whisper of something that had not existed when the evening began. A possibility neither had been looking for. Under the Santorini moon, amid the scent of salt and jasmine, two people accustomed to observing life from the margins stepped tentatively toward its center together. Ocean between us. The transatlantic flight hummed with white noise as Penny pressed her forehead against the small oval window. Below, the Atlantic stretched endless and blue, 3,500 miles of water separating Boston from Barcelona. 3 weeks had passed since Violet's wedding, 3 weeks since she'd said goodbye to Jasper Calloway on a sun-drenched Santorini morning. "Coffee, miss?" A flight attendant paused beside her row. "Please," Penny murmured, accepting the small cup with a grateful smile. After returning to her apartment overlooking the quiet street behind the library, Penny had thrown herself back into work. She cataloged rare manuscripts, led children's reading hours, and organized the annual fundraiser with methodical precision. Her life had resumed its familiar rhythm, yet something had shifted like a book reshelved slightly out of order. Her phone chimed with a new message. Jasper. Just presented the Park Güell renovation plans. The committee asked why the central courtyard reminded them of Santorini. If only they knew. A smile tugged at her lips. Since their return to separate continents, messages had flown back and forth. Observations about their days, photographs of unusual architectural details he spotted in Barcelona, images of rare book illustrations she discovered in the library archives. What had begun as a courteous exchange of contact information had evolved into daily conversation, growing more personal with each passing week. They'd progressed to video calls that started in the evening and stretched into the early morning hours, conversations that wandered from literature to architecture to childhood memories. They might appreciate the Mediterranean influence, she typed back. Congratulations on the presentation. She hesitated, then added, I'm actually on a plane right now. His response came immediately. Boston to New York for the literary conference? Not exactly. Boston to Madrid. Then the connection to Barcelona. Penny watched the typing indicator appear and disappear several times before his response finally came through. You quote, recoming to Barcelona? When were you going to tell me? The conference invitation had arrived a month after the wedding, a prestigious gathering of international literary archivists at the Biblioteca de Catalunya. Any other time, Penny would have politely declined, citing her workload. Instead, she'd requested the time off immediately. Surprise question mark, she replied, her heart racing. The conference starts tomorrow. I'll be there for 5 days. The plane dipped slightly through turbulence, mirroring the flutter in her stomach. Was she making a terrible mistake? Their connection in Santorini had been magical, but magic rarely survived in the harsh light of reality. Send me your arrival details. I'll meet you at the airport, came Jasper's response. 12 hours later, Penny emerged from the arrivals gate at Barcelona El Prat, exhausted and rumpled from travel. The terminal bustled with activity. Families reuniting, business travelers striding purposefully toward taxis, tourists consulting guidebooks, and there, standing slightly apart from the crowds, was Jasper. He looked different somehow, more substantial in his natural habitat than in the dreamlike setting of Santorini. His hair was shorter, his casual linen shirt and dark jeans a contrast to the formal wedding attire she associated with him. For a moment, doubt clouded her excitement. Did she really know this man at all? Then he smiled, and the doubt evaporated. Welcome to Barcelona, he said simply, taking her carry-on bag. The ride from the airport to her hotel passed in a blur of colorful architecture and tree-lined boulevards. Jasper pointed out landmarks and shared historical anecdotes, while Penny struggled to reconcile the fairy tale memory of their night in Santorini with the real man beside her. You're quiet, he observed as they pulled up to her hotel in the Gothic quarter. Just tired, she said, though it wasn't entirely true. And trying to figure out what we're doing. Jasper turned to face her fully. Having dinner tonight for starters. Then I thought I'd show you my Barcelona. The places tourists don't find after that. He paused. After that is for us to decide together. The hotel room was small but charming, with a wrought iron balcony overlooking a narrow medieval street. Penny showered away the fatigue of travel and changed into a simple blue dress. As she applied a touch of lipstick, something she rarely bothered with in Boston, her phone chimed with a text from her colleague, Dominic. Everything okay at the Maila conference? The director mentioned he's eager for your report on the preservation techniques they're using for the Catalan manuscripts. Reality intruded sharply. This wasn't a romantic getaway. It was a professional obligation. Whatever was happening between her and Jasper existed in a bubble outside their normal lives. Just settled in, she replied. We'll take detailed notes tomorrow. When she met Jasper in the lobby, the sun was beginning its descent, bathing the ancient stones in golden light. He led her through labyrinthine streets to a tiny restaurant where the owner greeted him by name and ushered them to a corner table. "You come here often?" Penny asked, noting the familiarity. "I designed the renovation of his daughter's apartment," Jasper explained. "In Barcelona, that makes you family." Over plates of paella and glasses of local wine, they cautiously rebuilt the connection that had formed so naturally in Greece. The initial awkwardness melted as they remembered the rhythm of their conversations. "Tell me about your life here," Penny said. "Not just the glossy architecture magazine version." Jasper considered the question. "It's solitary in many ways. I have colleagues, acquaintances, clients. But when you choose to leave what's expected of you," he shrugged, "some parts of belonging go with it." "Do you regret it?" "Never," he said firmly. "Creating on my own terms is worth the cost." Later they wandered through the illuminated city, past Gaudi's fantastical creations and through quiet plazas where locals gathered. When they reached the waterfront, Jasper led her to a bench facing the Mediterranean. "The same sea as Santorini," Penny observed. "Just a different shore." "That's the thing about the Mediterranean," Jasper replied. "It connects more than it divides." The implication hung between them. Penny gathered her courage. "I can't stop thinking about you," she admitted, the words tumbling out. "But I don't know if it's real or just wedding magic, holiday romance, something that only exists outside normal life." "I wonder that too," Jasper said honestly. "I've built a life here, you have yours in Boston, we barely know each other. Yet I've told you things I've never told anyone." "Same." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "But is that enough?" The question lingered unanswered as they walked back to her hotel. At the entrance, Jasper hesitated. "Your conference starts early tomorrow. I should let you rest." Penny nodded, sudden shyness overtaking her. "Will I see you tomorrow?" "I have meetings until evening," he said. "But I could pick you up after your sessions." The next 4 days fell into a pattern, Penny attending lectures and workshops during the day, Jasper collecting her in the evenings to explore his favorite corners of Barcelona. They discussed literature and architecture, debated films and politics, shared childhood stories and professional frustrations. With each passing day, the connection deepened, becoming something neither could dismiss as temporary infatuation. On her final evening, they sat on the rooftop terrace of Jasper's apartment building. The city lights spread below them like fallen stars. "I leave tomorrow," Penny said, stating the obvious to fill the silence. "I know." "So what happens now?" she asked, voicing the question they'd been circling all week. Jasper S expression grew serious. "Now we make a decision. Do we try to build something real across an ocean? Or do we accept that some beautiful things are meant to be temporary?" Penny thought of her organized life in Boston, predictable, comfortable, safe. Then she thought of how alive she'd felt this week, experiencing the world through Jasper's eyes. "Long-distance relationships rarely work," she said pragmatically. "Different time zones, separate lives, growing resentment." "All true," Jasper agreed. And yet, she echoed. The city bells chimed midnight. Tomorrow would bring difficult goodbyes and a return to separate realities. But as Jasper drew her closer under the Spanish stars, Penny wondered if some connections were worth fighting for, even across an ocean. "I don't have answers," Jasper whispered against her hair. "But I'm not ready to let this end." In that moment, with Barcelona spread before them and uncertainty ahead, Penny made another choice. Not the final one, but a step toward possibility. "Neither am I," she replied, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of hope and fear in equal measure. The ocean between them was vast, but as the night deepened around them, it seemed less like an insurmountable barrier and more like a challenge to overcome, one message, one call, one visit at a time. The final flight, November in Boston, painted the city in shades of amber and burgundy, a stark contrast to the vibrant Mediterranean palette Penny had left behind 2 months earlier. She hurried across the library's marble floor, her footsteps echoing in the vaulted reading room as she approached the rare manuscripts section. "You're still here?" Dominic looked up from the restoration project they'd been working on together. "It's nearly 7. "Just finishing the Hawthorne correspondence catalog," Penny replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I lost track of time." "Again," Dominic said with knowing emphasis. "Third night this week." Penny didn't respond. Immersing herself in work had become her defense against the growing distance in her relationship with Jasper. What had begun with daily video calls and messages had gradually thinned to brief texts and weekly conversations, each one more strained than the last. The 8-hour time difference meant her mornings were his afternoons, her evenings his middle of the night. When they did manage to connect, Jasper was often distracted by his expanding Barcelona project, while Penny found herself reluctant to share the small details that made up her days, fearing they would seem inconsequential against his cosmopolitan life. "Earth to Penny." Dominic waved a hand in front of her face. "The fundraising committee meeting? Tomorrow at 9? "Right, yes. I'll have the donor report ready," she assured him, gathering her materials. Outside, the early winter darkness had settled over the city. Penny wrapped her scarf tighter as she walked toward her apartment, checking her phone reflexively. No messages from Jasper today. Their last conversation 3 days ago had ended awkwardly, with long pauses and forced enthusiasm. "We need to talk about this," he'd finally said. "About us." "There's nothing to discuss," she'd replied too quickly. "We're both busy. It's normal." But they both knew it wasn't just busy schedules creating the growing divide. It was the impossibility of nurturing something real across 3,500 miles of ocean and fundamentally different lives. Her apartment felt emptier than usual that evening. Penny moved through her nightly routine mechanically, heating leftover soup, checking her work email, selecting a book from her nightstand stack. But instead of reading, she found herself staring at the small watercolor of Santorini she'd purchased, before leaving the island, now framed on her bedroom wall. Had it all been a mirage? The connection she'd felt with Jasper? The sense that someone finally saw her completely? Perhaps fantasy couldn't survive transplantation into reality. At midnight, unable to sleep, Penny opened her laptop and began typing an email she'd been drafting in her mind for weeks. "Dear Jasper, I've been thinking about timing and distance, and how some connections, however meaningful, aren't practical, beyond their original context. What we shared in Santorini was beautiful. What we tried to build afterward was brave. But I think we both know." A knock at her door startled her so thoroughly she nearly dropped her laptop. Who could possibly be visiting at this hour? Cautiously, she approached the door and peered through the peephole. The world stopped. Jasper Calloway stood in her hallway, his hair windblown, his expression a mixture of determination and uncertainty. A small suitcase stood beside him. With trembling hands, Penny unlatched the door. "What are you doing here?" she asked, barely able to form the words. "Being impractical," Jasper replied, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "May I come in?" Her apartment, which had always seemed perfectly adequate, suddenly appeared small and mundane through his eyes. Or so she imagined. The architectural magazine stacked on her coffee table, purchased after returning from Barcelona, seemed like a painfully obvious attempt to connect with his world. "You flew all the way from Barcelona, without calling first?" Penny asked, struggling to process his presence. "If I had called, you would have given me all the logical reasons why I shouldn't come." Jasper ran a hand through his hair. "And they would have been excellent reasons." He wasn't wrong. Penny gestured for him to sit on her small sofa while she perched on the edge of the armchair across from him. "How did you even find my apartment?" "Violet," he admitted. "I may have called in a sibling favor." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, so different from the easy conversations they'd shared in Greece and Spain. "Why are you here, Jasper?" Penny finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because I was about to lose something important without even fighting for it." His gaze was steady, direct. Because I've spent 2 months trying to convince myself that what happened between us was just circumstance and timing, not something real. And was it? Penny challenged, protecting herself from hope. We met at a wedding, caught up in romance and beautiful settings. Back in the real world, we're different people with different lives. That's what I told myself too, Jasper acknowledged. Until last week when I was presenting designs for a new library in Valencia. He reached into his bag and withdrew a folder, handing it to her. Inside were architectural renderings of a stunning modern library with a glass dome that would flood the reading room with natural light. I designed it for you, he said simply. Not literally, it's a commissioned project, but every decision, every angle, every space. I kept thinking, would Penny find peace here? Would she discover something new in this corner? Would she feel at home? Penny studied the beautiful drawings, her librarian's eye recognizing the perfect balance between function and inspiration. That's when I realized, Jasper continued, that you've become the lens through which I see my work. And if that's possible across an ocean, maybe other things are too. Penny set the drawings aside carefully. It's not that simple. Long-distance relationships. I'm not proposing a long-distance relationship, Jasper interrupted. I'm proposing a solution. From his jacket pocket he withdrew an envelope and handed it to her. Inside was a formal letter from the Barcelona Institute of Design and Architecture. They're launching a rare books conservation program, he explained, as she scanned the document. They need someone with expertise in historical text preservation to help establish their restoration protocols and train their staff. Penny looked up sharply. You got me a job offer? I mentioned your work to the director when they were discussing candidates, Jasper clarified. Your reputation preceded you. Your article on preservative techniques for 18th century bindings apparently made quite an impression in conservation circles. The job offer is based entirely on your qualifications. Her mind raced with possibilities, leaving Boston, starting fresh in Barcelona, being near Jasper. It was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. Or, Jasper continued when she remained silent, there's a second option. He pulled out another envelope, this one containing architectural plans for a building renovation in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The Historical Society is converting the old Whitman factory into a cultural center. They need a principal architect who specializes in adaptive reuse of historical structures. He met her gaze steadily. I submitted a proposal last month. They accepted it yesterday. Understanding dawned slowly. You would move to Boston? If that's what it takes, Jasper said. The Barcelona studio can function with me splitting my time. Technology makes remote work possible. You would leave Spain? Your practice that you built from nothing. Not leave, expand. His expression grew serious. Penny, I'm not asking you to uproot your life. I'm saying I believe in this enough to change mine. Whether that means a new branch of my firm in Boston, or supporting you in Barcelona, or some combination that we figure out together. Outside her window, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, dusting the street lamps with crystalline light. Inside, something frozen in Penny began to thaw. Why? She asked, needing to hear it. Jasper crossed the space between them, kneeling before her chair. Because when I'm with you, I'm the person I want to be. Because you see the world in words while I see it in spaces. And somehow together, it makes more sense. Because finding someone who understands you completely is too rare to sacrifice to practicality. He took her hands in his. I don't know exactly how it works going forward. I just know that not trying would be the only real failure. Penny looked at this man who had flown across an ocean on the chance that what they'd begun in Santorini was worth fighting for. The careful walls she'd built around her heart began to crumble. I was writing you an email when you knocked, she admitted. I was going to say goodbye. And now? Jasper asked, vulnerability evident in his voice. Penny thought of her orderly existence before the wedding, safe, predictable, and increasingly hollow. She thought of the woman she'd been becoming since meeting Jasper, braver, more open to possibility, more alive. Outside her comfort zone, beyond the familiar, waited a life she'd never imagined for herself. It wouldn't be easy. There would be compromises, challenges, adjustments. But for the first time, the unknown seemed full of promise rather than threat. "Now," she said, gently touching his face, "I think we write a different ending." Jasper smiled, relief and joy illuminating his features. "Not an ending," he corrected softly. "A beginning." As the snow fell silently outside her window, transforming the familiar Boston landscape into something new and unexplored, Penny made her final choice. Not between cities or careers, but between fear and courage, between safety and possibility. "A beginning," she agreed, closing the distance between them with a kiss that felt, after everything, like coming home. In a small apartment in Boston, with snowflakes dancing against the window pane, two people who had once been strangers at a wedding embraced the beautiful uncertainty of a shared future. Proof that sometimes the most important journeys begin when we least expect them, leading us not to distant destinations, but to the people we're meant to find along the way.